Arizona wide receiver Tetairoa McMillan could be the pick at number 12 for the Dallas Cowboys, but will he make it there? We'll discuss all of that next.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Stay tuned for the Armada Player of the Week later in the show. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can follow him on Twitter at McCoolBCB. On today's show, we're going to talk about a bunch of draft rumors that are coming out today on Monday. Generally, you shouldn't pay attention to rumors that are coming out on Monday, but we're going to do it anyways. Then we're going to talk about our ultimate mock draft selection that we made at number 12 later. But Landon, let's start with this. We had a 7th-round mock draft from Jordan Reed today of ESPN, and it's a very similar mock to what Dane Brugler put out just a week ago. In fact, the first 3 picks are all exactly the same. At pick number 12, it is Tetairoa McMillan, the wide receiver from Arizona. In round 2, it's a running back, Quinshun Judkins from Ohio State. And then in round 3, the Cowboys go to the defensive line, add in Shamar Turner from Texas A&M. Do you think people are just starting to make these mocks because that's what everybody's been mocking for the Cowboys, or do you think there's actually some smoke behind it?
I think, as we get further and further along in draft season, the number of potential landing spots that these guys can go to and the number of combination of players that haven't been chosen in a mock draft that's been publicly released gets thinner and thinner. So I think it's just inevitable that, we were going to have a mock draft that was going to be almost identical to somebody else's at some point. So I don't know that, I don't know that just because we've seen Turner's name here twice that he's any less likely to be the pick for the Cowboys in the 3rd round. Again, I think these are good selections by 2 obviously savvy draft veterans who understand the needs of the Cowboys and understand the value of the spot. So it's not surprising that we see kind of repetitive names, right? Because again, we know what the Cowboys' needs are. We know the value of these players and where they're picking. So it's not surprising that these names keep popping up. But I don't think it necessarily indicates like an actual extra preference by the Cowboys for these players over other players.
No, but let's talk about this with Tetairoa McMillan, who Jordan Reed does have the Cowboys picking at 12. We heard some kind of rumblings and whispers that, hey, maybe they would draft Matthew Golden, the receiver from Texas, ahead of McMillan. But it sure seems like over the last week, we've kind of went back to, if McMillan is available at 12, that's the pick.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that it is good that I feel like we're waffling, right? Because to me, I feel like at times there have been moments where the Cowboys get to draft week, which, by the way, it's draft week, guys. I know. It's crazy that it's draft week. And we get to draft week and we've been talking about the same guys over and over and over again, and then suddenly they're the pick. Or we get to draft week and we start hearing a new name that we hadn't heard previous up to then, a la Leighton Vander Esch, right? I think about that year, right, where we didn't hear Leighton's name really whispered too much at all, and then suddenly the week of the draft, it's the only name being mentioned, right? So I am glad that it does feel like there may be more chum in the water than previous seasons, right? The Cowboys may be doing a better job of throwing folks off the trail. But at this point, it's really anyone's guess as to where the Cowboys are going to go. I think we feel pretty strongly that if wide receiver is available, if Tet is available, Tetairoa, I know he hates being called Tet. If he's available, that he gets picked at 12. I think the question becomes, if he's not available at 12, do the Cowboys view the wide receiver need as so strong that they go ahead and take Golden over maybe other players that they have graded very similarly or even slightly higher? or do they kind of just decide to pivot on that pick the best player available, and try to solve that wide receiver position problem in the second round?
I think the interesting thing is if McMillan is gone by pick 12, probably means another player at important positions available. Because I don't see any way that Ashton Genty gets to them at 12. It seems like the Jacksonville Jaguars are considering him at 5. We know the Bears would love him at 10. So if you have Genty off the board, you have Mason Graham off the board, you have McMillan off the board. I mean, and I think Jalen Walker is going inside the top 8 picks. You could have a really good player potentially fall to you. I'm just not sure who that is. Is it Will Campbell? Does Will Campbell not go at 4? Is it someone like Armand Membu, who, we think the Cowboys like at least a little bit? I guess I have a hard time envisioning, like, if McMillan's off the board, an awesome player not being available to them.
Yeah, I mean, likely if McMillan's not there, then that means, like you said, Membu fell. I would say the other name that when I see this happen a lot, the other name that I see fall a lot is Tyler Warren. The tight ends just get picked a little bit later, right? So yeah, I think that that's always the case, right? Is like when we talk about these guys and who's going to get picked and, who's getting picked over who, it's important to provide the context of who's there, because, if Tetairoa McMillan is there or is not there, I'm sorry, at 12, that means that somebody else that was expected to go in the top 12 didn't get picked and is available for you to pick. So it's always about the particulars there. And I think that it's easy when you're a national media guy and you're trying to fit, players that you feel like, hey, this is a first round guy and these guys have this need. It's easy to kind of mix and match those spots and just try to lay out a mock draft to get it out before deadline. As we get closer, right? Like we start to hone in a little bit more on what these teams are looking for. Obviously, there's more smoke coming out as well. But I do think that it is making more and more sense that, the Cowboys are being mocked with a player that is, I think, appropriately valued at their pick. I think the question becomes, if he isn't there, will the Cowboys still go wide receiver, or do they pivot to a different spot? Because I think that's going to tell us the real value that they've placed on a guy like Matthew Golden.
And we should mention there's been a lot of rumblings, at least on social media on Monday, that Tetairoa McMillan could be an option to Jacksonville at 5. The Raiders have always been a potential option because they need an outside receiver. They don't have one on the roster. The Saints at pick 9. They could use a receiver because their 2 top receivers, Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed, both coming off major injuries from last year.
Yep.
Chris Olave had 2 concussions. I think he's up to 4 or 5 already in his NFL career. Having said all of that, I still think there's a really good chance that he's available at pick 12 because it seems like teams are valuing this wide receiver class differently. And I just don't know, like, if a 4-5-5 receiver goes inside the top 10.
Yeah, it's going to be about flavor. It's going to be about like what you're looking for as a receiver. And then I think the other thing too that I've noticed, at least when kind of evaluating those guys, is those guys being the teams above us that potentially could take McMillan, is that wide receiver is not the number one need for any of those teams. It feels like those are all teams that have pretty stacked depth needs, right? And at positions probably even more important than pass catcher at a couple of them. So I do think that there is a chance that if the board falls right and nobody is kind of getting what they expect, that I mean the Saints or someone, they're like, we didn't get name your player that they wanted, right? Okay, fine. We need a wide receiver. Let's go get Tetairoa McMillan. I just don't know that any of those teams. I think the Cowboys are probably, let's put it this way. I think the Cowboys are probably the first team that would have Tetairoa as like their hope to fall to them, right? Like everyone else, like they're taking McMillan if a guy that they didn't already anticipate gets picked before them, and they're like, this is a good consolation prize. But for the Cowboys, Tetairoa McMillan, I think, is probably your hope to fall to you at 12.
Again, just to recap, McMillan at pick 12, Quinshun Judkins to the Cowboys in round 2, Shamar Turner, a defensive tackle, in round 3, Go check out the rest of the 7-round mock draft on ESPN by Jordan Reed. He does a great job. He's got explanations for almost every single pick. Go check that out. Landon, let's go talk about some draft rumors because we've had a million. I've been trying to keep track of all of them this morning, and they just every time I refresh Twitter, there's another one. Let's talk about some of the ones that relate to the Cowboys next. This episode is brought to you by Amazon Fire TV. Did you know that your Fire TV is also an Xbox? You can turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices. No console required. Just grab your pair controller, subscribe or sign into Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you are ready to play. You can dive into hundreds of premium titles from EA Sports College Football 25 to Call of Duty Black Ops 6. You can do it as easily as you stream your favorite shows. It's gaming made simple, and it's all on your Fire TV. And with 4K streaming, you can watch more than 1.5 million movies and TV episodes from your favorite subscribed services like Netflix, Prime Video, Disney Plus, Max, and more. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller required. Available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K, Fire TV Stick 4K Max, and Fire TV Q. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Landon, I got a bunch of rumors here from a couple of really good sources. Let's start with some from Brian Broaddus. So he was on a show with Jeff Kavanaugh, which you should go check out. It's on Jeff's YouTube channel. And Broaddus had a couple of really interesting rumors. One of the ones that I thought was most fascinating is he said, don't write running back at pick 44 in pen for the Cowboys. It's interesting that he didn't mention running back for the Cowboys at 12, which whew, thank goodness. That's great. But he basically, and I've been feeling this all along. Like, I think they're looking at 44 as getting a player, maybe on the defensive side of the ball, maybe a guy that falls to them that they have ranked as a top 30 player, and then targeting running backs in round 3, maybe a little bit later. But first of all, do you believe that?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, because they're going to take a running back at 12. So why would they take one at 44, Marcus? That doesn't make any sense at all.
I think the real pen to throw. Let me find it.
For those of you in the audio, Marcus just dipped off screen
I found a whole thing of pens, actually, that I can keep throwing for every running back that gets picked early.
Look, I mean, certainly it's possible, right? Like I have, the more we've gotten closer and closer to the draft, we've heard a little bit more about the potential for there to be a running back run early. And look, let's also talk about this, right? Here's the other part of the problem with smoke season, right? Or smoke session or all the smoke that's happening, right? Is that it's not even just that teams could potentially be lying to us, right? It's that they could be laying plans that just never come to fruition, right? Like, I mean, a lot of times what the teams do is they have plans based on who gets picked, right? Like, okay, if this guy gets picked, then we're going to do this. If this guy gets picked, then we're going to do that, right? So, like, for this, like, if the Cowboys get to 44 and Judkins and Henderson are off the board, right? Maybe they don't view Sampson or, that kind of next group, Caleb Johnson as, quite the same level of back as those Ohio State guys. So maybe at that point, if the running back, run goes a little bit early, they don't pick a running back at 44. They're not going to force their hand and because they know they can wait and still get good value. So maybe at that point, they look at some of the other spots, the other players that we've been talking about at 44, some of the defensive players, maybe we're hearing maybe some offensive line folk, maybe some, all kinds of different stuff that's happening. So I think that if the right folks aren't there at 44, they're probably not going to force the issue. They'll wait till the 76 pick and then get a guy that they think is better value at that spot.
And we've talked about this for a while. I think the Cowboys are going to try to get a highly rated player, maybe at a non-position of need with that second round pick. Like, this is where historically they try to get guys that are discounted, whether that's Jalen Smith or Randy Gregory or, Trayvon Diggs. This is where they'll try to gamble on some guys. Maybe they gamble on somebody like James Pierce, the edge rusher from Tennessee, who's falling down boards. Maybe that's where they try to get their corner, and it's Savon Ravel from East Carolina, who might have been a first-round pick if it wasn't from the knee injury stuff. Another comment that Broadus had in that stream is that the Cowboys really like Tyler Booker, which the guard from Alabama, which is not surprising because Dallas they want to get bigger on the offensive line. We're seeing Booker start to fall down the consensus board. He's down to like 33, 34 overall. And because of the positional value, a guard, I think it's likely that he gets within a few spots of where Dallas picks at 44.
Yeah.
But if the Cowboys pick Tyler Booker at 44, and you've got Cooper Beebe at center, they've got Brock Hoffman, who they like a lot. They signed Robert Jones. They signed Shadiq Charles. They signed Hakeem Adeji. They have TJ Bass. All of a sudden, you have a lot of names in that interior offensive line room.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do. And I mean, I'll go even beyond that too. Now you got a lot of beef in that interior offensive line, and a lot of physical attitude. I think if they keep Tyler Smith at left guard, we've got BB at center, and then you plug in a guy like Booker into that right guard spot. I mean, now you're moving bodies.
Tyler
right?
Smith is the smallest offensive lineman in the interior. Then
wait, he's smaller than BB? Really?
I think BB's 332.
Oh my God. So yeah, I mean, like I think you're moving bodies. You're going to more of a gap man scheme, more power, right? So it's necessary, right? And that's the one issue that I have with the idea in general with just the kind of succession plan at right guard right now is that you've got some guys who I think can play the positions, absolutely, but you're trying to move to a run blocking scheme in which you need to move people off the ball. And so I think if you want to get bigger and more physical at that spot, I think adding a guy like Tyler Booker to those other two guys that are already in your offensive interior, that's how you move people off the ball.
Yeah. So we'll see. I wouldn't be surprised if Booker is a target for them in round 2, should he make it to them. I got one more that's not necessarily Cowboys related, but maybe it is. We heard from Peter Schrager, who had one of the most accurate mock drafts at this time last year, say that one player that he's heard that's going to go a lot higher than what current mock drafts have is Mykel Williams, who a lot of times you're seeing him in the teens, late or early 20s. Mm-hmm. He is somebody that we kind of heard early in the process Dallas might like. And then Todd McShay this morning said, the league loves Mykel Williams. I saw a board from an NFL team where he was 6th or 7th overall, and he has a hard time seeing him getting outside the top 12 or 13 picks. Are we not talking enough about Mykel Williams? And I don't necessarily think he was saying 12 because of Dallas. I think he's just thinking like he's going high.
Yeah.
Are we not talking about Mykel Williams enough as a potential pick at number 12?
Maybe not. I mean, look, here's the thing, right? Like, very young, 20 years old, extremely fits the profile of an NFL edge, no matter what kind of scheme you're playing in. And especially for the Cowboys, you're looking for a close side defensive end. This is the guy, right? Like almost 35-inch arms, and he's athletic. I think the thing that a lot of people are having a hard time, myself included, when I watched him was watching him without knowing that he was hurt, right? Like, I think so my brain still has the 24 tape I watched of him with an ankle injury, a pretty serious ankle injury that he battled the entire year. So I've been trying myself to kind of go back and watch more 23 tape just to kind of, and I've been doing the same thing with Will Johnson, right? Like, just to kind of remind myself, hey, this is what teams are looking at, not the injured version of these guys. They're projecting from this spot at 23 where they're hoping that the player can develop once they're healthy. So I think that Mykel Williams, especially in this class, right, is one of the most athletically gifted players in this class. I think part of the other thing I will say for myself is that I think the conversation with Mykel Williams always started with him versus Shamar Stewart too. And I think it's always been like, why don't we view Stewart the way we view Mykel Williams? Because of the athletic traits, blah, 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 production, that sort of thing. But I think that's also unfair to Mykel Williams, who is the guy that we're originally comparing him, like the guy that we're trying to get Stewart up to, right? So but I guess this is all a way of saying I think Mykel Williams has always been kind of higher than we've been talking about, but he's one of these guys who, flashed in 23. And so we just don't talk about him as much because his tape wasn't as exciting in 2024. I think he's a tough evaluation for some folks because of that. But as far as where the NFL views him, they view him as a, NFL starter who could develop into a star and is still incredibly, incredibly young.
And one of the things, so there's multiple reasons why the NFL likes Mykel. He's long, he's athletic, but it seems like he was a leader in the locker room, more of a silent leader. But they said he's just a professional. And I think if you're comparing and contrasting that to, let's say, some of the other defensive linemen in this class, there is some like, okay, hey, if we draft this guy, we don't have to worry about Mykel Williams. He played in Kirby Smart's defense. He played all over.
And Smart's defenses too. Like at this point, like we just have to account for the fact that those guys aren't getting sacks. These are good defenders, but the only person, not very many people are producing, the way that you would hope in this Kirby Smart defense. But that doesn't mean that they're not good defenders.
No, and actually, it's probably they're getting drafted lower because of the sacks, right? Because they're just they don't have the raw production. But almost all of those guys on the defensive line have been pretty good in the NFL. Just depending on where they've been drafted. Even someone like Nolan Smith, who was 235 pounds playing on the edge, really starting to come into his own. So, I have my doubts that Dallas will actually select Mykel Williams because I think he might be gone before the Cowboys turn the clock.
Yeah, absolutely. And would I be shocked if they took him at 12? I would be surprised, but I'm not going to I'm not like, oh, that, cannot believe it sort of thing, because he's worthy of that pick, I think. The question is, like, do the Cowboys reach past, some other glaring spots and maybe even a player that's ranked higher to go pick him?
All right, let's talk about a pick that you and I made in the Locked On's Ultimate NFL Mock Draft. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by Nissan. The Armada Player of the Week is brought to you by our friends at Nissan in the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Each week, we're taking a look at some draft prospects that we think stand out, the guy that we believe showcased the strength and power needed to maybe push the Cowboys forward as we look toward the season. And this week's Armada and clear-cut player of the week is Mykel Williams, who we just talked about, who is an incredibly strong, athletic, powerful defensive end that we think would fit really well with Micah Parsons. He's rugged. He's a heavy-duty player, just like the Nissan Armada. And when it comes to the Nissan Armada, they say go forth and conquer. And that's exactly what I think Mykel Williams can do in the right scheme. It's clear that our player of the week is out here ready to conquer the road ahead with confidence, just like you can in the all-new Nissan Armada or any of their outstanding vehicles. Take the Nissan Armada, Rogue, or Pathfinder and go find your next big adventure and shop NissanUSA.com. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen today. For your second listen, you can find the Locked On NFL Mock Draft available now on Locked On NFL Draft. Go inside the Locked On War Room for all 32 picks in this ultimate 7-episode series. The Locked On NFL Mock Draft available now on Locked On NFL Draft's YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And Landon, let's talk about our pick in that mock draft. At pick number 12, Tetairoa McMillan was off the board, so we didn't have the chance to select him. So tell the listeners what we did.
Yeah, we selected Texas wide receiver Matthew Golden with the 12th pick. And look, I think, this is a pick that we have discussed a lot as a potential guy that the Cowboys would be looking at, despite the fact that obviously Tetairoa being the preference there. I think that Golden is a solid pick and really would fit well with what the Cowboys want to do opposite of CeeDee Lamb. The 4.28 speed has been much conversed over, but I think he has speed. Like, I don't think that part is in debate. It's just maybe not quite the speed that we saw on the 40 time there, right? I still think he has the speed to stretch the field vertically, to take advantage of man coverage opposite of CeeDee Lamb. Just a guy that I think really started to come on in the second half of the season with Texas once he kind of fit better into that offense. had a little sit down with Steve Sarkisian halfway through the season, kind of got on the same page, and then really took off as they got into the playoffs, became their number one target. So a guy who you're projecting a little bit more, I think, than Tetairoa McMillan, just because his production sort of kind of came all there at the end. But a guy that I also think is probably on the rise, and his best football is still ahead of him.
I won't be surprised at all if Matthew Golden's the pick. Whether even if McMillan's on the board, it wouldn't shock me if they pick Golden, because we've heard from Brian Schottenheimer and from Stephen Jones that they want an explosive number 2 receiver, and Matthew Golden fits, and he's above 190 pounds. You're not getting one of these 175-pound guys that you're worried about. Will they be able to hold up? He's above 5'11", so he's not a smaller receiver. We saw Texas use him as an X. We saw him use him in the slot. We saw him as a Z receiver. And you kind of need that when you have CeeDee Lamb, who's going to be moving all over. And that's one of the interesting things. If you got a really versatile receiver like CeeDee Lamb, the rest of your wide receiver room better be versatile, because they're going to have to fill in the gaps. And I do think Golden, and this is why I've been saying the whole time, I can see an argument for Golden over McMillan. I can see how he would fit better in Brian Schottenheimer's offense than maybe some of the other receivers in this class.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's about fit, right? And I think in general, like, this is sort of the issue, right? We'll see this in the draft to play out a little bit as well, is that I think for a lot of these wide receivers, there isn't like an AJ Green type, right? That's like a kind of universal number 1 for all teams. I think Tetairoa is probably the closest thing to that. And that's why he's kind of the consensus wide receiver 1 outside of, outside of obviously Hunter. But I think he's, the rest of the guys that fall into the categories beneath them, it's going to be about what you're looking for. And even in the context of that, like, the Cowboys may look at this situation, like you said, and view Golden as a better fit for specifically what the Cowboys want to do with their wide receiver too. So I would say that kind of generally, and obviously on the consensus board, you see McMillan rated higher. But those kind of ratings, again, are always done by folks that aren't viewing them through the lens of specific team schemes and rosters, right? And the Cowboys may do that and view it through their roster and view Golden's like maybe lack of overall appeal to all teams being caught up. To McMillan, simply by being viewed through the lens of, hey, how does he fit inside a Schottenheimer offense?
I will say the consensus is starting to close, because coming out of the combine, McMillan was 10th overall and Matthew Golden was 27th. So that was a big gap.
That's a big gap, yeah.
I'm going to post the consensus board probably on Wednesday. But of the expert consensus board, we have McMillan at 12 and Matthew Golden at 19. So it's starting to get a little bit closer, to the point where fit's going to matter probably more so than, hey, we've got this guy ranked 5 spots ahead. If they think Golden is a better fit, or if they feel like both these guys are good fits and we'll just take whoever's available, I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, I mean, look, even on the consensus board, like 17 picks, that's still enough room to allow for preference, I think. But yeah, now we're talking about like seven picks is the difference between now. That certainly is well within the range of, that's like, again, that's consensus. That's not being viewed through individual teams' needs and that sort of thing. So that certainly makes you feel like the value is there for Golden being taken at 12.
Yeah. So ultimately that was our pick in the mock draft. We think it's going to be probably a wide receiver at 12. It just seems like the sequencing of the draft makes the most sense if they grab their playmaker in round 1, and then they try to grab an impact defender, maybe a guard, maybe a running back on sometime on day 2, but that's at least the path that we were thinking. And that's why we ultimately went with Golden. Really quickly, before we go, if Golden is the pick at 12, what would you give that grade? Or how would you grade the pick?
Yeah. I mean, again, like, I think if McMillan's not there, then I think you're batting a double there, right? With Golden. I'll give it a B. Right. It's a solid pick. It's not going to light the world on fire, but I don't think you screwed up the pick. I think you still got good value. You got a guy you think is going to help your team. And even like kind of looking at who else was available on the board, like I think that Golden is probably the guy that you want, right? Like obviously value is there, but then there's also fit. And I just think that not only is Golden the kind of, wide receiver 2 that you're looking to fit, but I think, stylistically he also fits very well. So it just makes a lot of sense if he's the pick. Like I said, even if McMillan is there, I could understand it because they view maybe they view a potential fit better than McMillan, depending on how they want to use him.
All right, that is it for today's show. We'd like to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every single day. Go check out the channel on YouTube. Download the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. We've only got a couple of shows left until the NFL draft. Just a quick scheduling note. We'll have our usual Monday through Thursday shows posted regular time. The Thursday show will actually come out a little bit earlier than usual, so make sure you look out for that in your feeds. Thursday night after the draft, after round 1, we will be going live. Make sure you check that out. Friday after day 2, we'll be going live as well. So check out the YouTube channel. Make sure you're following Landon. Yes, Landon.
Also, we have squad shows again this week. So I'm on tonight, I think around 4:30 Pacific, 7:30 Eastern. So make sure you check us out. Marcus is on Thursday morning. So these are new. These are ongoing. They're a lot of fun. Make sure you guys check them out.
Yep, totally different vibes of the show. It's with Glenn Stretch Smith. We've got Jeff Briggs. So different type of atmosphere. We'll have some different conversations. Make sure you tune in for them. Follow Landon on Twitter at McCool BCB. I'm at Marcus _Mosher, and we'll see you right back here tomorrow.